Ron. All right, we're joined by Taylor McHargue, CBS and ESPN college football analyst. Taylor, I want to start with, we'll get to the playoff and the Heisman, et cetera, but what are your thoughts about Rich Rodriguez and the possibility that he might end up back in West Virginia, and Bill Belichick, forever and ever NFL coach, unbelievably successful as a possibility at North Carolina?
Yeah, well, I think it's fascinating also with Scott Frost going back to Central Florida,
yep,
and with Rich Rod going to West Virginia, both of those guys that are obviously had a ton of success at those stops. And I know you asked about Rich Rod, but I thought Scott Frost's comment was really interesting. In his press conference where he was talking about the road to success and not stopping to realize, hey, I've got it pretty good here at Central Florida before he took the Nebraska job. Now, obviously he played there, so there was a ton of appeal and draw to try and make it happen. But I think the biggest, obviously, out of the three of those is Bill Belichick. I think, to be honest, I'm a little bit stunned because I get that the college game is moving to more of a professional model, but I think there's a big difference in dealing with professionals and professional agents versus, you're recruiting 16, 17, 18-year-olds that now have agents, and it's not the same. And sometimes these are not the most professional agents. Sometimes if you listen to Mike Gundy from earlier this year, these guys he's got players on his team where, their college roommate is their agent, and he's having to deal with them on renegotiating their contract in the summer. And those are going to be the things that Bill Belichick has to deal with now. So I don't think there's any question he's going to be successful. I did think it was interesting at this point in his life and his career that he would get back into the college game.
Yeah, I look forward to a recruit saying, like, Bill Belichick came to me and was like, hey, you want to come to North Carolina and, win some games? Like, that's just not what you picture. But look, Deion Sanders doesn't go house to house anymore. And apparently Bill Belichick wants to build essentially an NFL-style talent acquisition wing of the recruiting department where coaches could maybe focus more on coaching and the general manager recruits.
Yeah, I think this will be – we're already starting to see the tide really turning with the top programs in the country that, the term general manager, I think for a couple of years, fans and even people in the sport kind of rolled their eyes at what does a GM really do in college? Not anymore. I think that is a very real and very necessary position. And even at your group of five level schools, that's important. But certainly at the top of the sport, that goes beyond one person, right? It's going to be an entire team of people, and that budget that has to increase for a lot of programs because this sport more and more, and it's kind of always been this way, but it really now is about talent acquisition because the way these contracts are handled right now, where it's basically just 1-year deals and you're reevaluating your own team and you're re-recruiting your own team, you better have a group of people just like in the NFL. They've got scouts that handle the college level, and then they've got scouts that are handling the other pro teams, and they're constantly evaluating their own roster. That's going to become more and more the model of college football.
Taylor, there is so many guys that have entered the portal. It's impossible to go over even like a single group in a segment, but we've seen some interesting names as far as the quarterbacks go. You got Mensah from Tulane, obviously Wegman from Texas A&M, various others that are on the move. Mensah going to Duke, but Wegman still looking around, and Houston appears to be a possibility for him. Braden Locke from Wisconsin's in the portal, and there's various others. So I'll leave it to you. Who has jumped off the page in terms of a portal quarterback, or maybe even just a portal player that is now of major interest to you?
Well, I thought Malik Murphy was interesting. I thought that Duke would try to retain him. I thought that was, you talk about Mensah backfilling him. That to me, that entire kind of chain reaction to me seems like a lot of these decisions are being made before the end of the season, which I think more often than not that is the case. Wegman going back home to Houston makes a ton of sense, and that would be a huge win for Willie Fritz because there's been stretches of Wegman's play where it was really good, and if you get any sort of consistency at that spot in the Big 12. I think Houston all of a sudden goes from, they're move well beyond what their win total was this year. And I think that's going to be the case for Houston regardless. And then the rest of who's in the portal right now, nothing surprises me anymore with the portal. I think the thing that people need to remind themselves of is these rosters have been cut down to 105 now. And I told a story earlier on Sirius XM radio, but we had a family friend who kid plays at a Power 4 school, and he had to have the conversation this week about we're going to retain you. You have a roster spot next year. Are you going to be here? But there were a number of his teammates and friends that were walk-ons and scholarship players that were cut and told after the bowl season, you're not going to be here. So if you're going to go into the portal, go ahead and do it now. And those conversations are going on all over the country. And getting to 105 roster spots, that is going to be a massive shift in how recruiting is handled and roster retention. And the walk-on program for major college teams is a really important part of filling out their roster and prep. And that is effectively going away. And that's going to be more than the portal. That's the piece that there's going to be some real changes. And that's really going to impact your group of 5 and FCS teams, because you've got this flood of talent that's now out there, not only in the portal, but on rosters where they had a spot and now they don't.
Taylor, did the college football committee get all of it right, most of it right? What did you disagree with, whether it's seedings or who was in or who was out?
Yeah, I think they got it right in terms of who got in. I was pleased to see that SMU got in. I think I know the committee was valuing Alabama's wins in the top 25, but I think also SMU didn't have a loss nearly as bad as Alabama going on the road and losing by multiple scores to Oklahoma. So a 3-loss Alabama team with that loss and the Vanderbilt loss, I didn't think deserved to be in. I also think SMU, the way that they played in the conference championship and it going down to the wire, I think that's what ultimately got them in. I think the seeding was my only real, I don't know if gripe's the right word, but you could point and say Oregon runs the table, they're undefeated, and their reward is they've got to play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee versus Penn State. They lose the conference championship and they get rewarded with a home game against SMU. And if they win that, then they turn around and play Boise State. And if you look at how the spreads look right now and what projections would look like, there's nobody that has a more favorable matchup than Penn State, who will be heavy favorites against both of those teams. And I also think Texas got a great draw. Getting to play Clemson at home, they're a 2-score favorite. And then if they win, getting to play an Arizona State team that Arizona State wants to run the football. No one has had success really running the football against Texas front. So I think Texas got a great draw. I think Penn State got a great draw. And I think Oregon, out of really everybody, I think they got one of the worst draws.
Taylor, is there anybody that's entered the transfer portal that doesn't have a home that surprised you that they entered? Or is there someone like maybe under the radar that you've seen, especially doing AAC games and some of those that people may want to look at that power level?
Not really. Most of the guys that go into the portal now, you kind of expect it because it's one of two things. It's either a guy that wasn't getting the playing time they expected, or it's somebody that they're going to try and go get a check. They are going to try and elevate their status and move up to the Power 5 level, Power 4 level. I think the guy that from a group of 5 school that I've seen a lot that I think still has a ton of upside was E.J. Warner. I think the way he was used at Rice was not to his advantage. And with what Scott Abel wants to run at Rice, it made all the sense in the world for him to go ahead and jump in the portal. But I had him a couple of times when he was at Temple. He is a really dynamic passer, but he needs to be in an offense where it's wide open and really more of an air raid system, even though he's a smaller stature guy. And I thought the system that Bloomgren was running with him at Rice, that was not tailored to him. He looked uncomfortable, looked like he was in his head quite a bit. So that's a guy that don't be surprised if you see his name pop back up and play good football down the line.
That leads me perfectly into my question. I was going to ask you about Rice and about are you going to get with the collective and you go pony up and get the big quarterback for the new coach, Taylor? Are you working on that right now?
You guys are going to get me in trouble. I think Rice is there. I can say this: there is a concerted effort to make sure that there's a couple things going on. Number one, having a new coach, trying to reinvigorate fan base that for a while now has wanted to see that program turn the corner. It's been a decade of losing seasons. So there it is, the collective as strong as it's ever been. And then the other thing, Rice is trying to raise a ton of money to revamp their stadium. And part of that is going to be, after we won our conference championship, it's amazing how quickly they turn around and build a brand new facility. It's crazy how that works.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I think the new president, Reggie DeRoche, and the athletic director, Tommy McClellan, they are pro-athletics. They want to get football, baseball, basketball back in the right direction. Basketball is off to a great start this year. So Rice has been in a not great spot for the major three sports there for quite a while. But it's not for lack of effort with this current regime. Tommy and President DeRoche are doing a fantastic job. And I have nothing but great things to say about them, and hope, nothing but for the best for Coach Abel, and looking forward to finally getting to meet him.
Do you have a Heisman vote, Taylor?
I don't, but if I did, it'd be Genty.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. I know if you did that you couldn't really say anything, although some guys still do. But I'd seen your tweet the other night, and I tucked it away for this segment, and I wasn't sure about the vote when you made it public. But, yeah, you would go Genty then.
What I would say, if you took Genty and put him on Colorado, I think he's a good enough player that Colorado would have, at a minimum, gotten them into their conference championship game. I think if you flip that and put Travis Hunter on Boise State's roster, they're not in the college football playoff, and if they are, they're definitely not ahead of a couple or one other power conference team. So I think the impact of Genty and what he did, I understand he ran against some defenses in the Mountain West that were not unbelievable defenses, but in the biggest moments against Oregon in non-conference, against UNLV when they had to play them twice, the entire structure of every team they played against was designed to stop him, and no one could. He's still got whatever his total is right now. I don't have it in front of me, but he's knocking on the door of beating Barry Sanders' record. And I'll say it again, getting them in ahead of a Power 4 conference championship team, that is a Herculean effort, and most of that is because of Ashton Genty.
Taylor, of the teams that are in the college football playoff, and we do appreciate your time, I was just doing this when you were talking about the defense, Texas, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas, Tennessee, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oregon are 6, 7 of the top 11 defenses in America. In this day and age where they're throwing the ball all around, but think about that. That 7 of the 12 teams to get in are in the top 11. So defense still does make such a huge difference.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think Texas is maybe the best example out of everybody you just mentioned, because there's been a couple games, and as recently as against A&M and against Georgia, where if Quinn Ewers just plays fractionally better, they win both of those games. But quarterback play for Georgia and for Texas, you kind of go around the country. I don't think quarterback play has been great this year, but Texas defense has kept them in their 2 losses to Georgia. That is what kept them in games, and that's ultimately what got them the win against A&M as well, where Quinn is battling turnover issues and giving A&M short fields and giving them the ball back. So I don't think there's any question once you get into this time of year, if you can have a dominant front, if you can get after the quarterback without having to bring a ton of pressure, and you can limit explosive runs. I know that sounds like coach speak, but by this time of year, that's the stuff that matters most.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Taylor McHargue from CBS and ESPN College Football Analyst.